Good afternoon, everyone. After lunch sessions are difficult, but we are going to make it as interesting as for you. And to start with, I'm Bindu, and I take care of QC engineering function in Deltek, as the introduction was done. And today, the panel is titled, The Testing in the Age of AI, Automation, Adaptation, and Accountability. If you have spent the last 12 months in this industry, you would know how important these three words are and how they resonate in our day-to-day lives. AI is no longer something in the horizon. It's there in our test pipelines. It is deciding how we manage quality, and most importantly, it is defining how our budgets are designed. It's also designing how we think about quality. Now, it's no longer, the questions that we are going to discuss here are no longer theoretical. They are the questions that are getting asked in the sprint retrospective meetings, in the QA architecture reviews, and most importantly, the budget discussions again. Because the licenses that we get for AI are heavily regulated, and obviously the organizations do want to know what we are doing with the budget. Are we automating more, or are we automating differently? When AI generates the tests, and if something happens, which is inevitable that there would be misses, who would be accountable? And that's a question very difficult to answer, but quite often asked. Now, we are going to handle a set of questions here, and all our panelists, my esteemed colleagues here, they're going to be giving their honest answers. They may not be perfect answers, but these are the answers that they have generated outside, with the years of experience. They have worked in the industry, and without much ado, I would directly want to go into the list of questions that are going to be answered today in this panel discussion. The first, to start with, we are going to have, with GenAI and Agentic AI rising, how do you see the future of automation testing evolving? This is an interesting question to answer, and before I pass it on to my panelist, I would like to give my perspective. I see the agentic AI and the agents that we are getting for incorporating in our QE automation function completely changing the way we are doing testing, completely changing the way we are approaching quality. And I see the shift in three functions. Earlier, our approach was always code-based. Now we are moving from code-based to intent-based testing. Now, when we had something like, we need to validate element X or click on element Y as part of our test scenarios, now a tester is supposed to give a test scenario in simple English and expects ALM to generate the tests for them. And rightly so. This is actually happening with all the MCPs and playwright agents that we are using in our own organization. The second shift that I'm seeing is in the way we approach quality for predictive intelligence, the intelligence that AI brings when it comes to understanding what is the ROI on all the tests that we run. We do not have to run all the 10,000 inventory of tests, but AI is able to predict the risk associated with running something based on the changes that we see, changes that it can read, the historical patterns that it has, and the trend and the complexity metrics it's about to deliver. It's about to calculate with all the information that it's being fed. So with this shift, what I am really seeing is the way people think and approach quality is definitely changed and will change. And the best use of human intelligence is in strategizing the testing, nor implementing the tests. Let LLM do the boring part or the mundane part of creating automation scripts, but QE will now focus on the intent of the test and intent of the user on what the scenario is supposed to be, rather than writing scripts or creating tests. With this, I pass this discussion on to Vishal, who's going to answer the same question.
Hello. Yeah. So thanks, Bindu. So interesting take actually on how AI is going to impact automation, right? So I feel from an automation perspective, I think the QA leaders who have been in the traditional software testing phase, right? They will be moving towards the QA orchestrator kind of roles, actually. And when I say QA orchestrators, basically they will be defining risks, business logics, pipelines, like, risk-based testing in the pipelines. Let's say if you do a change in a code, right? What should have impacted, actually, right? That's one point, right? So those kind of things will be taken care. But yes, overall, if I have to ask me, right, the key changes that I see is like, now 80–90% of your code will be generated by AI, right? So we will be moving from script-based approach to goal-based approach, what she said, right? Intent, right? So you have to have specific goals. So we'll be basically moving from that script-based approach to a goal-based approach and agentic way of doing things. So basically each QA will automation, there will be automation agents that will be come into play these days, right? So each will be having a different job, right? Maybe one could be basically running a regression test suite or a nightly build, right? One would be basically finding your issues that has come up or the failures that has come up, right? We'll have agents for that, right? So that's where I see. The second thing that I see which will have an impact is the self-healing part, right? That's very important, that's happening actually. So if there are locator changes or things that are happening, right, AI is very prudent in identifying those changes and bring it to the system and just maybe fixing it as well on the go. So these two places I feel certainly that's there. Plus, I think manual QA tasks like QA test design, authoring of test cases, test designs, all this will go off, right? Because AI, if you give AI the location of your Jira or Azure DevOps, right, and give all the PRDs and wireframes and everything, it should be able to generate the test cases. So basically, the generation will be done by AI, but yes, reviewing it should be still with the human in loop, right? That's what I see, but yeah, that cannot be automated. That still has to be done by the manual folks and the automation guys, actually. So yeah, that's what I had. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Now moving on to Ravi, how would you want to?
Yeah, very good points from my colleagues. So I would like to understand the question or explain the question in a different context, like broader context. Instead of talking about where automation goes, and also we'll understand where the software development goes, right? So it's all tightly coupled. So, so when the automation, we started because we don't like the manual work. So we started automating. Humans always like to automate things. So, then there is an, change comes in the industry. .com came in, and then internet came in. So the software exploded. So now another disruption in the industry, AI came in. So what it's going to do is, it's going to democratize the knowledge, also especially the software. That means like there will be an explosion in the software development. So right now, whatever we are developing is only limited. So with the power of AI, it's going to explode. That means a lot more automation, testing. You can see like anybody who has access to mobile, they can develop a software. I mean, at least they can, right now they can build a website and mobile app. So that requires, testing and, definitely quality assurance. So automation is becoming more and more becoming part of the development. So when you develop a, code, a developer, QA engineer existed separately. Now if you use an agent, it's going to generate the code. It's also can generate the test case, test scripts, run, self-healing, everything, whatever we talked about it. It can all become one. And, the role of software developer or QA engineer is going to be like, governing, right? So how, all this process works together, right? So are we getting the right output? Are we, the agents are testing the right areas? Any bias is there? So, we have to do more of a governance, and then automation, it's a part of the, software development process. It's going to be merging one another, and we are going to benefit out of it. It's going to be a lot more interesting in terms of, how it's going to evolve. Right now, I think we are going to enjoy the benefit of AI and then learn through the, how it's going to evolve. Thanks.
That's an interesting take, Ravi. Now over to you, Sunil.
Thanks. So before jumping into how does AI affect the automation part, or how does AI affect the quality part, we need to understand, like, conventionally we have been getting requirements, we have an implementation, we just test whether the implementation is aligning to the needs, and that is what we automate. But when it comes to the AI-based automation, one, the development stack itself is changing. Now, today there are a lot of AI agents which are developing code, there is a lot of code churned out, and the volumes are exponentially increasing. Second, when it comes to automation, it's about the goal that I want to achieve as a user on the UI. So I would have to start top down. This is my goal, this is what I want to achieve, and how do I build? So the role of QA moves from actual test execution automation to the test generation based on whatever the right context, right skills that are applied, and all of this. So the focus of QA in automation would be more on those areas, and QA will become the enablers. For example, we are talking about, in our organization, we started something like horizontal guardrails. So we define these guardrails. Any code, whether it's developed by a human or by an AI agent, so these are the guardrails. So is it aligning to the requirements? Is the goal easy to be met? How much deterministic is it? What about the scores on how exactly I am able to achieve this goal? So then once we start thinking about this, there are a lot of agent level tool calls, the tracing, and multiple things that come into picture. The way we approach automation is changing. Of course, when we take the traditional approach of automation, UI automation, like a lot of solutions are already there, people are already doing a lot of automation, but do we need to automate at that level, or we need to go one level up where we are actually testing as a user and automate those things? So that involves the knowledge of how systems are developed in the AI world, and then what exactly the users want to achieve.
That's a great perspective, Sunil. Yeah, we are moving on to the second part of our discussion, wherein we are going to be talking about the experiments. What is the most interesting or bold AI testing experiment your team has tried recently, and what did you learn? This is definitely going to be interesting to hear. Over to you, Prashanth.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope I'm audible. Yeah. So, yeah, as most of the panelists told, like, artificial intelligence is currently, it's not futuristic and it's currently real. So it's embedded into most of our software development lifecycle, and it is kind of, organizations are slowly moving from agile to a new term, something called as agentile, right? Where agents are part of our SDLC lifecycle. So I'll take a couple of minutes to explain the challenges that we faced and what the kind of platform that we built and the results that achieved, okay? So typically in the healthcare world or the B2B or B2C ecosystem, we face the challenges like we do have the continuous feature releases, and the production deployments will take, and which have the huge customer impact has to be done. And sometimes we'll have the QA bandwidth crunch, etc., right? So because of these things, your automation, the in-sprint automation, etc., will go take a back seat, right? And which will kind of accumulating to your complete backlog. So that is when we decided, like, if we can have any agentic platform, so that could help our testing team, so that we can have the automation with respect to the agentic AI. So in typical SDLC lifecycle, we do have like the primary thing is like we do write test cases from the requirements, and then we go to the test execution. That is where like your UI as well as the API automation will be in place. So to automate this entire process, like we built a platform using the Autogen agent, multi-agentic platform. So that consists of like the multiple agents, like there are multiple agents which have the specific role. Through that role, it will achieve the specific task, and will achieve both test case authoring as well as the automation. So when it comes to the test case authoring, if you have an option to upload a PRD, so that can be converted. So there is a specific agent which has the requirement parser. So it parses those PRD and passes to the next agent, which is the test case authoring agent. So it writes the test cases. Then there is an agent that comes the test case review. So through which you will get the test cases which are kind of the PRD to the test case writing, it hardly takes 2 minutes, which was kind of human heavy in past, right? Similarly, when it comes to the automation, right, we have the integrated like the platform that agents with the MCP server, through which like we could able to generate the playwright as well as the rest assured automation code, which is directly, not just the random code, it is directly you can embed it into your automation framework. Like you can download it and check into your GitHub repo so that it is an executable code. And generation of the functional test cases, API test cases, etc. All these things like we could achieve using the framework that we built using Microsoft AutoGen, right? So this has the results that we achieve, like we could generate like 80% of the test cases, which are accurate test cases, and the quality code that could be like embedded into your automation framework.
Yeah, that's amazing. Vishal, now over to you for your experience.
So I think he covered most of the use cases. I think this is kind of very common, most of the organizations are using, right? But yeah, I want to talk about something specific that we have been doing in our organization, right? The first thing that I want to talk about is basically, I think most of you guys are aware that companies have nightly builds, right? So they run their whole automation suite every night just to make sure nothing breaks, right? That's a very tiring process, actually. That has a lot of technical debts as well, that it might fail because of certain reason, right? And then you have to do that whole evaluation of why it failed. Did it fail because of the build? Did it fail because of the environment? Or n number of conditions, right? So this was not a problem statement that we had. So we tried to solve. So what we did was, we tried to create an agent in the CI/CD pipeline itself for the development code itself. So what it did was, it used to basically check whenever any check-ins were happening or any PRs were getting merged. It used to figure out what is the path of that flow that has been added or updated or enhanced. And based on that, it chose the right test cases that has to be executed at that point of time. So what it did was that you used to do risk-based testing. The developers used to get feedbacks immediately. And it would save a lot of time for not going with the nightly builds and just at least have quicker PR reductions as well. So that's where we have seen improvements, and that has certainly worked for us. And this is something that I think it's a good use case that other folks should do there in their organization. Now coming to the second part, actually, I will take a bit of time on this. So yeah. So you guys have heard about the black box and the white box testing. Now with AI, black box and white box is kind of a little tricky, actually. So what we did with black box is that, so let me tell you what application I'm talking about. So we have an ITSM application that we deal with. We sell it to our customers, and each customers have a different ITSM, UI, everything, right? Based on their requirements. Somebody would have an incident, somebody would have an SR, somebody would have change management, right? So each customer has a different one. Now the problem is that the customer success team who does the implementation for them, right? It's very difficult for them to test the whole thing, right? Every time. They cannot run the same execution what is working on the QA environment. That might not work in the customer environment because that's very customized, right? So basically what we created was a web prober, actually. It's an agent that we created. So what it did was to basically, whenever implementation happened to n number of customers, right? It used to go, it's just like a web crawler. You might have heard about web crawler, right? So it used to just go to the web prober. You have the scenarios already documented and do exploratory testing. And that's where the black box things come into picture, because the person is not at all aware of the functionalities of the thing. So that's on the black box side. Now coming on the white box side, now take an example, we have created an L1 agent, actually, an agent who basically, so let's say a request comes to an agent for an incident, for a laptop missing or whatever, I mean, some production server issues or whatever it is, right? So basically we created several agents for that. So one was a scenario generator agent. What it does is basically based on the historical data and tickets that have come, we fed it to that, and that created the scenarios for the L1 agent, actually. And then basically based on those scenarios, it used to test that application and then maybe just see what's the input, what are details that when you are talking to an agent, how it's working, right? In terms of tone, biasing, classifications, all those things, right? And then we have an evaluation agent and a guardrail agent together, which basically takes care of that evaluation part of things, that, okay, whatever outputs that are coming, right, is it correct or not? So we are not actually kind of doing deterministic kind of things that, okay, you are just comparing the output, this should be the output, that should be compared. No, that will not work in AI space. You have to do goal-based testing there. So basically the thing is that, does it know what is the issue? Does a correct classification of your tickets? Does it transfer a ticket to the right work group? Does it transfer the ticket to the right SLA metrics, whatever you have? So these kind of things you have to think of. And this cannot be said by, you cannot just ask AI to think of it, that's where the QA orchestrator comes into picture, who has to define those guardrails and test it according to that. And this has certainly really helped us to basically explore that. And once we did the test POC and we kind of received success with that, we kind of productionize it by using real-time data to that and see how it works out, especially on the customer success space. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, Vishal. Yeah, I would want to hear from Ravi what your experiment was and how did it go?
Sure. We have been experimenting a lot, but I will just specifically talk about a couple of key things. So one, I think it is more about mind shift than how we use the agentic thing. So it's like we want to do this end-to-end, what Vishal was saying. So that's the one thing. So what we did is we did a small POC. But the interesting point is, it's not about how to stitch the tools together. I mean, the first round, it was not working out much because we know how our developers are the requirements. When we create a requirement, we don't really create that well. So the key difference here is the first round, it did not go well, but when we fine-tuned the requirement, I think everything fell in place, right? The test cases, coverage, and we are able to identify the bugs. So it all starts with the right requirement. When we do that, I think we can stitch the tools together. I think now the tools are evolving, so I think we can make use of it. That's one good thing. The second part is challenging the team, right? So I always I lead both QA and development, so tell the team that you guys have to pick up the AI and then start leveraging it, right? So QA engineers, always they look into only the QA part of it, but there is a key requirement, we have to build a chatbot for our console, Krutrim Cloud, so which we have been pushing out because of the other priorities. But our QA engineers, they thought I want to experiment and I want to build this chatbot. I said, oh, go ahead. So next day, they were showing me the demo, right? So it's the power of AI. And we had done some fine tuning and all these things. Within a week, we were able to deploy and it's live, right? So I think it's currently it is, we have to leverage it. So that's the real fact. That's what it is right here now, moment, right? It's not like some futuristic thing. We have to make use of it, and I think we are using it. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. It's interesting to note that the divisions between job functions, especially between development and QA, are getting merged because of this AI. Chandrashekhar, what's your experience?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. So I just would like to say that the vision that we have for our QA team is specifically looking at how do we transition from being a QA quality engineering team to becoming a QA ops team. So which kind of summarizes what each of us have said, trying to build multiple agents doing specific things and then try to get this transition into helping really the shift left happen across the SDLC. One of the experiments that we have done at redBus is traditionally when we do any testing, right? So we are limited to what we test as the test cases that have been executed or designed. Now, when you look at UI automation, you would end up spending the same amount of time for figuring out what are the locators, what are the actions, and then the incremental cost to add any test case or test automation flow is actually you'll have to write scripts. So we started thinking from first principles, and what we looked at is, since that investment is a static one, however, our use cases could be infinite. And why not leverage our user behavior and drive the automation towards that? So which effectively means you take away design of test cases, look at it only from the new feature perspective, but for regression, don't continue to run your exhaustive test cases that you've always been having, but look at using the current user behavior, drive the automation towards. As a part of this, we designed a unique framework, which we internally call as LEAP. We also open sourced it. What we do is, we are able to convert a natural language test case into directly execution. And as a part of that, we also generate code out of it. There are failures handling and learners also built. And in this framework, the beauty is that we will be able to switch this from web to mobile from a UI perspective. one of the key things while we were designing this framework came to us was the context, right? So we all know that context is the king right now, but less of it is not very effective, and more of it creates hallucination. So the way we designed our agents, which is for this UI automation, was having the right context and just right enough for the agent to decide and not hallucinate. So that is how we were able to build in some amount of determinism while the execution is happening. And just to add to what Vishal said, I think for most of the B2C companies, the first product that anybody would go with is like a chatbot or a incident management. And there we have, of course, leveraged LLM. We have built LLM as a judge to identify what is the kind of response that is coming, like hallucinations, etc. But now that it's already done, now any of these are business as usual. Our next challenge is, because systems are getting agentic, how do we define, like as in QA, how do we figure out whether the right agent, the right tool is called? And how do we look at tracing this whole telemetry that we call internally, right? So that is where we are working on, and also we have internal evaluation frameworks built.
Nice perspective on that. Now, I want to hear from you, Shrinidhi.
Good afternoon. So before we go to the experiment that we conducted at Blend itself, I just want to first think about what do we do today as a software development lifecycle. So there are imaginary boundaries between a development lifecycle versus QA versus sign-offs, releases, and starting from the product requirements and things like that. So this kind of has a lot of imaginary boundaries. It goes through a long process. So one of the things that we wanted to go bold and reimagine was how a PDLC looks like, right? It's more product development lifecycle now and not a software development lifecycle anymore. So let's reimagine, and let's call this person a product engineer, not a product owner. So the product engineer kind of writes a requirement in the Slack. Let's say we start with we are a Slack-loving company for everything. So we start with one-liner requirement. I want to write I want to build a KYC page. Now the Slack has an agentic bot which kind of goes back and brings in all the questions, contextual questions from the code repository, asking, you already have a KYC page in another product. Do you want to build it again? Do you want to, like contextual questions? What kind of, what is your definition of done? What do you want to, it kind of grills the product engineer of what do you want to build as a end product. So after, it kind of gives us an idea of how complete is the story by this. It keeps on grilling you until you really get to 80%. And then when you do that, there's a button where you click and you kind of send it to a technical engineer to just look at the technical context and say approve. If the story looks good, just approve, and the agent takes it back, writes the development code and also unit tests along with it, also writes automated tests, and also generates a PR and sends the PR for review. So once you look at the PR, you're ready to release it to production. You can again do impact assessment, click a button, get all the impacted end-to-end test cases run, and it's in production. So this is the reimagined PDLC AI native product lifecycle that we built. And of course, we started it as for a hackathon in one of the multi-company hackathon, and we kind of stood first on that. So we have started using it in production in our organization. Of course, there are some hallucinations. We have to build evals around it. Definitely accuracy makes a big deal here, and we have to put a lot of guardrails around it. But we are coming close, I would say. Around 80% of the code today, automated tests today, are all generated by AI. So this is like a game changer. I would say we are at the edge of a structural shift of how last 20 years looked versus what it is going to be the next couple of years at least.
Great perspective, Shrinidhi, and that's amazing that 80% of your code is written by AI is nothing short of magic. Who would have thought? Now, in the interest of time, the next question is about do you think full automation is realistic, or will there always be a human touch needed for true quality? We will try to keep it a very short answer for these, restricting ourselves to a minute or so that we get into the rest of it. And before I pass on this question to the other panelists, this is my take on it. The question should not be whether full automation is realistic. Is it desirable? Do we really want to go that way where we trust our product and the quality of our product to be completely determined by AI? Let me tell you why why I think it should not be. There are three things that humans bring to the table: the business context, the organizational context, emotional intelligence, and most importantly, understanding the user experience and empathy that the user should be having when somebody is using your product. And all these, the way AI can work is a very pattern-based or pattern recognition-based, but the way humans would do it would be much more realistic to and closer to how a user would be absolutely using the product. And my take is that we should probably not be having automation fully handled by agents, but we should definitely have human in the loop. 70-30 is, according to me, an accepted principle, wherein 70% of the automation can be handled by agents, and the rest 30% where we talk about exploratory testing, identifying the edge cases which are acceptable, which may not be the agent's decisions, may not be probably bang on when it comes to the edge cases that QA might want to wink. And most importantly, the context that the organizational context or the business context that a user might bring when he sees and reviews the cases that automation or an agent has created and tested, that would truly be, truly be the essence of the human in the loop and why he or she should be definitely reviewing what agent has done. So yes, 80%, like Shrinidhi was saying, is a great percentage to be there, but I would definitely want that rest 20 or 30% to be kind of handled by humans. Now passing on this question to Vishal, I'm sure you'll have a different take on this.
I mean, it's almost similar. I'll be keeping it very short, actually. In traditional testing, I felt, that's my personal opinion, actually. In traditional testing, I feel 100% automation is a myth. And I think it's overkill. We should not do that because, there's a testing pyramid that is there, right? It tells you that you can only automate risk-based tests or which is very repeatable, right? Those kind of things has to be automated, right? There is no ROI of automating everything. I don't see that ROI. That's a waste of time as well. And the same goes for AI, right? AI, anyways, we have not reached that level that you can have 100% automation with AI, actually, because that's where I feel, currently if you see, right, there are a lot of jurisdictions where you will need human in loop. That's where it comes into picture. So I think it's still right now it's 50-50 for the AI side. But yes, in traditional testing, I was never up for it, and that's my view for that.
Yeah. Prashanth, over to you. A short answer, please.
Yeah, so mostly I think you guys have covered, but see, the 100% automation have bit different perspective where the execution-wise, yes, it is possible, right? With the evolution of the tools like agents, etc., right? You have the test cases. If you consider this is your 100% of test cases, you can automate 100%. But however, quality is not just the execution. So that is where you need the human touch. So just to give an example, right? So you can end-to-end automate your checkout flow. However, like if there is any frustration with the user while working with the exploratory way, so that is where which cannot be possible. So quality and 100% automation, so to put them a bit separately. So we definitely need a human touch to validate and finalize it.
Great answer. Yeah. Now we go on to understanding how do you ensure your AI-based testing tools don't amplify bias or create false positives? Much important. And Vishal, over to you for you.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, guys. And I think this is a common question that people have that, okay, how do you not let bias and non-integrity creep in AI field, actually, right? AI testing, right? So firstly, I think the first way to look at it is that you need to have a diverse data set that for which you are kind of automating or, you're writing the use cases or testing, so that it touches all the risks, all the guardrails, all the use cases for a particular business flow, and that's taken care in that. Second thing is that using AI eval tools, we have like deep eval, OpenAI evals, we have PromptFoo came into picture recently, right? These are some great tools. In fact, IBM has launched one AI, IBM fairness tool is there, right? So these are great tools which will really help you to judge the prompt answers and everything, right? In terms of your relevance, your accuracy, your precision of your questions, right? Hallucinations, I think that's a very important aspect, right? If your prompting is not correct or you have not clearly called it out in your prompting, right, it will hallucinate. There are chances that maybe the data is not trained with that thing, right, and it might give you a wrong answer. So yes, those guardrails have to be set up, right, and that's where those evals come into picture, right. You set those prerequisites so that it gives you the right answer and it evaluates. Now, these evaluations can be done by AI itself, or you can do it via human in loop as well. So basically, there are two methodologies that we follow, like both actually. So because it's highly impossible to, let's say if you have like 200 data sets or 200 use cases to test, right? It's very humanly impossible to validate, right? So you can use AI to basically judge that. You can give a scoring for that, right? Let's say if it's beyond, you cannot have deterministic answers. You cannot be 1 or 0. It will be in points actually. And also, like, it also depends on the temperature and the seeding that you set for your models actually. If it's like beyond 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, right? It might be around your answer or what you're at least. There might be deviations as well. So I think these are tools that can help you in basically setting up those guidelines. That's what we guys are using right now. That's it. Thank you.
Prashanth, your take on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think mostly covered, like I'll take an example of like whatever the platform that we built, right? So initially when the agents try to generate the test case, right? Like most people talk, like it hallucinates, it used to hallucinate it a lot. And the test cases that used to be fabricated, kind of like, it may not be like 100% perfect based on the requirements that we have provided. So that is when like we started implementing like the model to understand our platform, like the domain, etc. So we have implemented like RAG-based system where it can have the complete context of the, slowly we used to teach based on the PRDs and other test cases, that previous data that we have, right? So that is one of the solution that we have done. And apart from this, like when it comes to the automation, right? So initially the code that generated may not be, was not 100% perfect. So that is where like we started integrating with the MCP servers. And mostly the teaching the domain specific and understanding that the agents and LLMs understand your particular requirement. So that is when we used to get the proper output. Yeah.
Great. Great perspective, Prashanth. Over to you, Roopasree.
I think, everything, mostly the panel covered. But I want to take a step back and, take a stand at what do we see as testing. I know today we are discussing as a scope of software testing and then AI that can actually accelerate and bring the scale and then bring the speed. Generally what happens when you look at testing just in isolation, we forget that a product is as good as the infrastructure it is standing on, right? And same is AI. AI is as good as the data, and the biases will never go away. That's going to stand. The second thing we always forget when we take testing in isolation is the reliability of the entire system that stands our product to be successful. The third thing is also vulnerabilities and InfoSec, which is a big part of any product release. So you can't really say I'm going to look at testing just as a software testing, but I think it's a broader thing. We'll have to broaden our vision to say, when we say testing, it just starts when the traffic hits your infrastructure and all the OSI layers that it can pass through, and then it delivers. I think that's where the through and through journey of a product or a software that we look at, it cannot stand alone on its own merits. It has a lot of infrastructure, it has a lot of InfoSec, and it has a lot of reliability that it stands on, and that's where a product is going to be successful. That's where a lot of AI can play a role. When it comes to biases, I always feel bias will never go away. That is bound to exist, and then AI can augment quality engineering, but never take away engineering judgment. I think that's the guardrail that we have to build. I think some of the steps that industry is taking, working with some of the industry folks on how they're addressing AI hallucination and the biases that we look at. One, of course, I'm sure in all of the companies, they have established a governing body. It's basically you need a governing body to kind of look at, is this good for the company? It's a responsible AI group, what we call as. They actually evaluate when you say, I'm going to implement this AI, whether it in the testing field or engineering field, they're going to say, where does it take us as a company? I think we definitely have to have a responsible AI group that actually evaluates everything that we do and then put the guardrails. I think the guardrail starts from there for us. The second thing is traceability, right? I think, Vishal, you talked about black box exploratory testing. Imagine an AI which is generating a lot of test cases. Let's take an example from a regression standpoint. And a tester, or in the recent industry, we call it as SDETs. They're as good as engineers. They're no more called as quality engineers. They're the SDETs. They don't know why it is generating that regression, right? So how are you going to kind of answer that when there is a scenario that occurs in your production and there is no traceability? You got to have a traceability when we talk about bias. The bias can exist at the interpretation of the human beings. That's where we say, I don't need a black box or an AI or a tool that generates blindly. I'm going to give a prompt, and then this is my user journey. Just go ahead and then create a regression suite for me, or a functional test cases, or even a unit test cases. If a developer or a estate doesn't understand, that's a problem for me. I have to have a traceability as a second thing, right? I need to create a transparent model, whether I'm going to use an existing model or I'm going to create my own, or, there's so many tools today available, open source or enterprise. That's my third thing, where I want to see a traceability to kind of make sure I build the guardrails along with that, from a AI standpoint. And the third is very, very important, data. As I said, AI is as good as the data that underlying. How are you training your AI, or even the tools? So they say it's a plug and play tool, but then again, it consumes a lot of telemetry data, your user data, the previous patterns. Unless you train AI on different parameters and diversified patterns, it's not going to predict whether it is the defect density that we talk about, the defect escape rate from a production standpoint, anomaly detection, right? See, all of that will not happen unless you train your AI on different models and build those guardrails. I think which is very, very important. So all this minimizes the bias. It will not take away. I think you said 70-30, and then you said maybe 80. I think that's where we are going to reach. I think it's still good. It takes away a lot of the toil that you see in the system today, both from developers and SDATs. Ultimately, it will be a single person who will do that. There will be no more QE, no more developers. It is a person assisted by AI, who will develop the software and deploy it, considering there is an infrastructure, there is InfoSec, there is reliability, guys. I think that you can't take away. So that's where I think the biases that you can minimize. That's my take on that.
Yeah, great insights, Roopasree. We talked about bias, but we also have to focus on the false positives. So Sunil, do you have a take on how we are going to ensure that the testing tools don't show false positives?
So on the false positives and various other bias, false positives and all, these are kind of... The false positives primarily are mainly related, or also related to the bias and different stuff, because fundamentally LLMs are non-deterministic. So whenever we use any LLM, any entity which is non-deterministic for building our use cases, the main thing we need to see is, are we giving it the right instructions? Is it trained in the right way? And all of that. So there are many things that come into picture. For example, the skill evaluation. Is it following? So you mentioned about telemetry and open telemetry. So we have to see whether we have the right telemetry to see what are the right skills that are loaded. Is the LLM temperatures and different stuff that are set properly? There are multiple dimensions we will have to think about. Plan adherence, skill adherence, and then any violations that happen. So anything that is not performing as per the defined areas, so in control systems, we tell if you cannot finalize or conclude that it has done the right thing, just flag it, right? So we need to have these detectable mechanisms in place as part of eval scoring and various other stuff, and then we need to start creating these alerts. And false positive, especially on the UI automation that we saw. We have Playwright MCP, we have a lot of MCPs that are coming in, cloud computer use, there are a lot of stuff. And we saw a lot of false positives, mainly because of the reason that the instructions to do something on a feature, on a system were not very clear. There was ambiguity in the system, right? Or the system was behaving differently at different times for the same instruction. So these things we need to be putting the right evaluations on, yeah, in this scenario, this is how the system behaves. And then have humans in the loop to identify, yes, this is correct or wrong. And this you have to connect it to the feedback loop wherein the skill healing will happen, the prompt healing will happen, and different stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting take, Sunil. Now we come to the people part. What's harder, finding the right testing tools or finding the right people who can use them as well? What is the bigger challenge? Vishal, your take on it?
See, I'm a human. I'll go with humans itself. I won't go for bots. So yeah, I feel that, I will look for a human, a QA architect who is aware of his business, who knows the guardrails, who knows the business risks, who knows the business flows, rather than knowing a particular tool, because I can skill him on the tool part. Tool has become a sprawl right now. Everybody is building tools, right? Building a tool is not a big deal these days, right? But getting the right mindset, a good architect who understands the AI system, right? I think that's very important. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on that. Yeah.
Thanks. Chandrashekhar, what do you think? What is the bigger challenge?
Yeah, I'd side with Vishal definitely. I think not to take credit from all the tool creators, we have been creating tools within inside redBus as well. But yes, I think human is still very important, and finding the right sort of people, because the tool's output is only as good as the people who use it. So unless we have the right approach, pick the right tool for the right problem that you have, and define what is the, evaluate it first and then define what's the success metrics. Unless the person is able to do all these things, it's very difficult to get a good tool to be very productive.
Yeah, rightly said. Shrinidhi, your take on this?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So there is no scarcity of tools today in the market. You name it, you get it. You can build it. You can do anything with AI. But AI is only as powerful as the person thinks for. So we need a mediocre engineer with great set of tools can do much lower than a person who really knows how to extract the tools and has a quality mindset. So I think how to extract the power of AI is all dependent on the person who's doing it. And moreover, I think QA is moving from less execution heavy team now to more judgment heavy. So I think that is where the futuristic of QA is also.
Yeah. So Shrinidhi, if I were to ask you, because you talked about getting the right humans, what would be the skill that you would be looking in a CV that you would be hiring maybe for the next requirement in your team when it comes to AI specific ones?
So I would say it's a little bit, we definitely have to go a little more than tools now. It's no more about Selenium versus Playwright versus Cypress, Java versus any of the other coding tools. I think it's more about adventurous mindset, a person's adaptability of how things are evolving and changing, and that is 100% what we need to look at in the interviews now.
Totally agree with you. Now, we come to the last section where we're going to talk about, in a world of fast releases where everybody owns everything, how do you maintain accountability for quality when ownership is shared across teams? And to give my perspective on this, usually shared ownership is considered no ownership. And when no one person, and as Ravi was saying, there are the differences between job functions are merging, are fading because of the advent of the tools that AI is giving us day in and day out. And when it is everybody's baby, nobody wants to take accountability, and which is the phase where we are getting into with all this. Now, in our traditional model, QA always was considered the gatekeeper. QA is accountable for anything bad happening with the product. There's only one person to ask because you tested the product well before it went out of the door. Now, with the advent of CI/CD, what happened was, yeah, there are daily deployments. We can't wait for QA to kind of give us the final approval. We are going to let the code in, maybe with few defects, it's all good. And now with agentic AI coming, who will take the responsibility for the agent making a mistake? Is it the data scientist who trained the agent? Or is it the QA specialist who tested the agent to make sure it did the right behavior? Or is it the deployment engineer who deployed everything? Or is it the SRE who's supposed to be said, yeah, we have deployed everything in production, there are 0 bugs there. So the accountability is a key task, and it's a key thing that we have it in the title of the discussion, and rightly so, because with shared ownership or joint ownership, it's important to have gates. It's important to divide the responsibilities of who owns what and where, and there should be traceability, there should be a mechanism to understand the lineage of what got tested, what got picked up for testing, and what was the reason if something went wrong. Do we know how to trace it to a bad test that it got picked up, or a newer version of AI model that got deployed and nobody tested the drift to understand why it messed up? So now the gates that we should be probably having is maybe threefold. One, with the unit testing, strongly guarded by development. It should be his responsibility. Nobody else is there to take responsibility of his code. The QE should definitely be having the regression tests and integration tests that he is always be historically owning. Now he has the additional responsibility of testing, validating the agents, making sure it is not deviating from what it was trained for. I would say that we should extend our responsibility of QE to even golden data set curation, wherein partly it is a data scientist's responsibility to make sure that the data that it is getting trained in, but QE also should have its own share of golden data set that it should be using for testing. So now we are moving out from traditional QA engineers to AI specialist QA engineers, and that is also one of the gates that we should be putting in. Last but not the least, there should also be traceability and on-time, real-time monitoring of what is going wrong and where. If we are not having any of these, we cannot hold one person responsible for an agent or a model messing up its algorithm and we not catching it, and we talked about full automation. If we completely rely on agent to create our code and agent to test our code with no guardrails whatsoever, we are in for big time trouble. So now accountability is a big thing in the industry, and it is wholly and solely can be done if only we put the proper guardrails, we put accountability where it necessarily needs to be put, and with the right set of people. That's my take. Now going over to you, Ravi. What do you think of it?
Thanks, Bindu, for providing your view. I think that's rightly said. So accountability, cannot be just a QA, right? I mean, that's been the traditional thing. Any failure happens, QA will be questioned why it escaped. But now with this industry moving towards frequent deployments to production, I can talk about our platform. So we do multiple deliverables per week. So I think this cannot be just a QA's job. So how we do it is basically in the principles of accountability comes from each team, and also observability and metrics, right? So without all these things, you cannot just rely on people. It's basically based on the process and metrics. Each service team, we have multiple service teams, VM, load balancer, VPC, each team is responsible for the outcome in production environment. So any failure happens, they are taking responsibility, but that is measured based on the SLOs, service level objectives. So they have, if it is uptime is 99.9, if anything goes below, then they have to work on their either release quality or tools, debugs, they have to improve. So they have to meet their SLO. right? So similarly, we have escapes for the QA team. So if anything fails in the production, they have to take ownership and then fix it. But at the end, I think it's a joint responsibility, but the governing principle is metrics and observability, and then each team measuring against that, and then fix it, right? So that way, we can do faster in an agile manner.
Rightly said, Ravi. Yeah, Roopasree, your take on this.
I think in today's world, fast releases are given. They're not anymore a luxury, but it's the need of the hour. Speed and the scale, it's like given right now. I said if you're not in that league, probably go-to-market strategy, the company's future, so everything will be questioned. But at the same time, when we talk about quality, as I always say, it cannot be looked at in isolation, and it's not one team's accountability, right? Gone are those days in a traditional setup. We used to have QE engineers, and if they test, and if they find defects, and if it comes back to the developers, that's where the accountability of the testing is what we used to say. Now quality is everywhere. In the AI world, let's see where the first step starts with. It starts with the data, labeling, annotation for a supervised data, and classification and segmentation for unsupervised data. Your quality starts from there. Even for your LLMs or SLMs that I want to talk about, finally, when you give a prompt, that's the data that you're actually pulling based on the embedding, your AI is creating. The quality starts from there. So you can't say it is the testing team responsibility. It is also a responsibility of a data labeler to make sure it's correctly classified, it's correctly labeled for a particular task that, that data will be pulled up. To the person who's actually the platform engineer who's building the pipelines, for the entire thing to automate and put to the production, he has to make sure certain gating system which is there in the pipeline that we build, it's all get executed, along with the synthetic data that we can create for testing, right? I mean, when you say I'm going to automate testing, it is not an easy task. You can just automate regression, but then when you look at the entire life cycle of testing, from a unit testing to functional testing to integration testing, which is a big part upstream and downstream in a very complex environment where you have thousands of APIs, which is actually connecting to produce a feature or produce a product. So having said that, I think everyone owns that accountability. But at the same time, there is also a collective accountability. I don't take away, where when we say a team, there is a collective accountability. I think that's where nowadays industries are establishing a quality engineering center of excellence, which provides the guidelines across. I mean, I'm saying not just for the software, but then end-to-end when we look at including the AI, including the infra, including, reliability aspect of it, saying this is what we look at as a company, this is my guardrail, this is my guidelines, these are the tools, these are a set of metrics that I want to measure for everyone. So that takes away the pressure on the testing team to say there is a gating that happens at every step of the way, and then make sure that is delivered. That is one part of it. Second part of it, holding the teams accountable true to the metrics they produce. Sometimes when they say, testing quality, we only go to the testing team. I said, show me your metrics, right? But then we never ask anybody in the shift left, solution designer or an architect. Are you using the right kind of design patterns, for some of these things? So what is your metrics going to be? I think that's very, very important to say when we have to kind of shift that accountability. And again, the last part of it, governing bodies. Making sure, at every step of the way, accountability is taken. I always give an analogy of somebody putting together a dish. You can just put 100 ingredients. But if somebody is not responsible for the outcome of that quality, that dish is not going to taste good, right? That's how the quality is also. Not to take away from the quality team, because that is required as a gatekeeper. But I think quality is everyone's accountability. It is not just a one person. Very important when we talk about software. I mean, I'm just going to focus on the software testing piece. Every bit of it that quality team brings in, I think that needs to kind of shift left from our data labeler to everybody from our AI space.
Rightly put. Shrinidhi, your take on this.
Yeah, I know we are almost time, so just want to leave with one annotation. I think I agree with everybody that said that it's a shared responsibility. I think we are moving towards more from a role-based accountability to a system-based accountability. No more asking, who approved the release. It's more about what justified the release, what metrics justified the release. So if we build metrics all along the way, all the eval categories and assess it time to time, I think that is probably we build quality throughout the cycle. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Short and sweet, but effective. Yeah, Sunil, your final last 1.5 minutes.
Sure, thanks. So accountability, end of the day, accountability lies with person who wrote the requirement and person who certified the requirement on behalf of the user who used it. Right? So that's the fundamental thing in quality everyone follows. One area that I have observed, and we are doing a lot of experiments on that area, is how do you associate that accountability to different personas in the SDLC? So one, just to give an example of an experiment that we did. So we had all the test repositories, the legacy test cases that were there in the Git repos and different stuff. And then we used the production logs to create different use case flows from the by crawling the application and what parts of application people are mainly using. So we were able to construct those flows. And when we constructed those flows and saw whether all of those flows are in the test cases, so then we saw the gaps. And it's very easy to hold people accountable there. Yes, these scenarios were missed by the product or the quality teams. Then once we have, then there is inter-system communications, right? The microservices, the different components talking to each other. We clearly know where was it broken, where didn't it perform as per the expectation. So with the advancements in AI, it has become very easy for us to associate that accountability to a given persona.
Yeah, rightly said. And I think we are almost at the end of the stipulated time for our panel discussion. And do we open it up for questions?
Right, do we have any questions?
Vishal, do you want to take that? I think the question is more full automation maybe by 2030.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think right now we are still not there because every week you are seeing some advents happening on the AI side of things, right? Opus 4.6 came, 4.7 is coming, right? So yeah, I mean, probably maybe the probability is there, right? That might happen. But as I mentioned, right, you are aware, right now that around 80-90% of the POCs that are happening on the AI side are failing actually. Maybe 10% or 20% are succeeding, maybe, right? So specifically on the QA side, I feel, right, and I've talked with the panels as well when we are connecting, right, we are still in that phase where we are kind of implementing that POC, but we have not seen the results yet, actually. They are still in evaluation phases. Somewhere it's working, somewhere it's not working. But yes, you don't know, right? Maybe in future we might have that, and that maybe the AI becomes intelligent. And that's where, I think one more point I think to mention here is that that's where now the companies or the AI companies who we are seeing, right, OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, whatever, right? They are moving from LLMs to SLMs now. Now SLMs will do specific jobs actually. So when you train a particular model for doing specific jobs, it will get better actually, right? Rather than having a generic answer. So yes, there is a probability that it might happen soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Suppose a team is having developers as well as the QA and the products, right? Suppose the engineering manager or a director of engineering means analyzes the AI and thinks that much of the QA part is AI is doing, and there are as well as there are five developers. With the AI, only 2 developers can complete the given work. So the manager will say, okay, there are 5 developers, 2 developers let them code and complete the coding, and the other 2 developers can complete the testing. So why do we need the QA team? So
Yeah, okay, that is an existential question for QE, so I think I'm going to take it up. So yeah, what you said is partly true. The divisions between QA and development is blurring for sure. But what is developer trained on? He's trained to code. And he's maybe trained to review the code, maybe he's best at it. But what is QE trained on? Empathy, understanding business context, understanding where the user is. And I'm not really, again, belittling what developer is capable of. Maybe he may learn, with the help of AI, he may learn. But I'm sure that if somebody is skilled in that particular role, he or she may be a better fit in making the human in the loop difference that, much better than a developer would. So yes, there are, the divisions are blurring. Somebody could take up, like I could create a tool in no time, maybe better than how a developer would, But the expertise that the QA has to break the system or break the code, I think developer would take some time to reach there, because just for the sheer reason that he or she was not trained in that. Okay?
I agree with her actually. See, I mean, it's the other way around as well, right? Code writing is commoditized, right? Anybody can write code. I can ask a 6th grader to write a code using cursor today. So the same way can happen, the same thing happen for QA as well, right? They can do the other parts, right?
Obviously.
Yeah, so that's going to be there. And see, I think you have to think from a perspective that we are also moving through a little shift left actually, right? QA are getting involved in the initial discussions that were not happening earlier actually in earlier stages, right? So that's where the shift left is happening. So it's not only that they are right only for testing, they are there for basically strategizing, helping the product owners to do the development based on their experiences that they have seen in this. So it's like it's changing, right? Your role might change now. There is a new role coming called FDs. I don't know if you have heard about forward deployed engineers, right? They do everything. So that does mean that developers are gone? No, right? So it's happening. It's coming up.
Can I just add to what you said? In our practical scenario, I mean, right now the FOMO is happening. Let's agree on that. I come from a BFSI background. So we still have to show segregation of duties to regulators before my model goes into the production. That means to say my QE role will still remain, right? One part of it. We still have a long way where AI can take autonomously in the financial world. That's not going to go away. The second part, I also say the quality engineers are the estates, as we call in our organization. They play a devil's advocate, right? So we do encourage our, the quality engineers to think out of the box about outliers, guardrails, and develop the design patterns, which can be part of the pipeline. It's not your regular regression, not your regular test patterns that you can develop, but at least the design patterns which can be part of solution architecture. I think there is an opportunity where quality engineers can play a role, because I call them devil's advocates. They can bring in a different perspective to the product where it can fail. Third, Harvard has actually published that statistics which says 80 to 90%, we are still in the hype cycle where we are experimenting what sticks from an AI standpoint. Of course, agentic commerce is coming very big way, where now people are going to shop on Perplexity, for example, which is already, by the way, operating in US, where they go search and then shop there. And then the traceability becomes big challenge. That's where quality engineers comes into play. How do they kind of write those regression? It's not going to go away as of now, the way I see it. Still some time.
If we see the overall quality mindset now, the thing that is required on the quality side, everything is centered around LLM, which is the brain. So one part of it actually develops, implements as part of the context or the requirements that we give. The other side, the quality mindset comes in to wherein we put in the right processes to see that the reasoning is happening as intended. It is reasoning in the right way. It is using the right training that it has received. It is doing it in the right way. How do we judge that? So quality engineers will have to upskill themselves on these areas so that, the traditional quality people being gatekeepers, yes, now it will not be like we are validating the end output, but we will be validating the overall process, how it is developed, what were the configurations that was used for development, because everything will be LLMs going forward, right? And entire ecosystem will be built around LLMs.
I'll just quickly add a couple of points here. So when we, that's what I tell my team always, don't think like you are a quality engineer, so you are an engineer first. So that means you can do coding. I mean, we are doing automation. That is nothing but development, right? So you can be a developer always. And also, if you look at the overall bigger context, human knowledge bases keep on increasing, right? So that means we also have to evolve and increase our knowledge base. So AI is another tool. We just need to learn and then become relevant. I think that is important for everybody.
Great perspective. I think, are we done with the questions? Yeah. Thank you. Amazing discussion, panelists. I'm so privileged to be being the moderator for this. I learned quite a lot. I'm sure the audience have got some things that they're going to take forward, and they're going to be great practitioners of what we talked about today. Thank you so much.